Hi students, I'm Una.
And I'm Scott.
I'm a UK OET teacher.
I'm also an OET teacher from the UK.
We've been teaching students to pass their exams for many years.
And now we're excited to help you pass your exams too.
This is the Swoosh English OET Podcast.
Let's get started.
Are you struggling with your OET exam preparation?
Are you unsure how to reach your target score of a grade A or B? Let Swoosh English help you get there.
Go to www.swooshenglish.com or click the link in the description for your free OET Complete Guide to Writing.
Everything you need to know to pass your OET writing step by step. Go to www.swooshenglish.com or click on the link in the description below.
Hello everyone.
Hi.
And welcome to the Swoosh English Podcast. My name is Una.
My name is Scott.
And today we are looking at the OET exam. We're going to look at the writing section of the OET exam, and we're going to go through how to use, read and understand the case notes. So really looking at what way you should approach the task, how you should delve into those case notes, and then of course expand the case notes and choose the correct information.
Surely something that many OET students actually I think maybe one of the primary things that OET students will actually need some practice with is actually turning all this medical jargon, all this varied information into a cohesive letter for OET. And I think understanding the case notes is basically the key to getting that score that you need.
It's crucial. And as we will see as we go through our podcast today and discuss, there's a lot of bullet points, a lot of shorthand in the case notes. And one of the biggest mistakes that I will find, or sort of weaknesses in relation to the letters, as I'm sure you have too, going through lots of letters from students, is, that they have just sort of lifted the case notes and put it into the letter and not expanded them into like proper grammatical sentences.
A copy and paste job as such. Also, being able to sift through the information that you find relevant versus what you think is irrelevant as well, because it's often too much to write about to make a 200-word letter, for example. But that's what we're going to go through today.
Sure, and that's something at the end of the day that will just come with practice. Being able to pick the correct information and rule out irrelevant information, depending on, of course, who your recipient is. So yeah, we're going to talk about all of this today. And of course, first of all, we'll just give an overview of what exactly the writing task is in the OET exam. A lot of students come to us as well, having perhaps taken the IELTS exam or tried to pass the IELTS exam. And they're of course used to doing 2 tasks and writing very academic style essays. And then they come over to the OET exam, and of course it is a bit different.
OET is a completely different kettle of fish, if you will. It's completely different. So let's just get stuck into the letter itself. So let's go through a bit of an overview about what the OET task is. So the OET task itself is a letter you might have to write. More often than not, it's a referral letter, but could be an advice or even a discharge letter you might have to do as well. In terms of the timing, you have 45 minutes in total. 5 minutes to plan and then 40 minutes to write.
5 crucial minutes.
So those 5 minutes at the very beginning of the task, you cannot write. So you're expected within those 5 minutes to plan your case notes.
And look at the case notes, analyze the case notes. So that's 5 minutes that you can really use efficiently and effectively in order to, go straight into writing that letter, and you'll put yourself in a better position if you use the 5 minutes usefully. And yet just remember that the writing task is of course profession specific. So it's suited to whatever your profession is. So if you're a doctor, a nurse, a dentist, whatever your profession, you are going to be able to read those case notes, okay? So don't stress about that. You're not going to see case notes that are maybe more suited to another profession. That's not what happens, okay? It will be easy for you to go through something that you have seen before, a layout that you've been familiar with before, typical in your profession, the kind of information.
Just not necessarily in English, but of course you will recognize this as it goes.
Of course, and you will have practiced lots of these kind of case notes in your preparation coming up to the OET exam, of course. You're not going to go Ideally, yes. As we advise, for sure, you're not going to be going straight into the OET exam only having read these kind of case notes in your own language. Make sure you get your hands on lots of case notes in English, whether it be with whoever you're doing your preparation with. Of course, we provide these at Swoosh English, and get lots of practice with these.
So another thing you have to take into account as well is exactly how you write your letter as well. You're not going to be writing in overly academic prose like you would with IELTS, but also you're not going to be writing an email or a text message for example, to your best friend after a night out, for example. You need to be formally professional and informative with your tone. So something that a doctor or a nurse or a dentist would write like. And it does take a bit of practice to actually understand exactly how that would be written in English. But I'm sure it does correspond to how obviously any doctor would write a letter, no matter in the world, with a few little, should we say, English language isms also thrown in as well.
I think the most important words to describe it are clinical and factual.
Clinical and factual.
So clinical and factual is, how your letter should be written with a professional tone, formal but not overly academic in nature. Yeah, definitely. So the main idea of the letter is for you to really consider at all times, and we'll talk about this in the podcast about how important this is, to consider who your recipient is, making sure you're keeping who you're writing the letter to, what information is important to them and relevant to them throughout the whole letter.
Yeah.
And obviously being able to convey, what the ailment or what the illness or condition of the patient is.
So a sense of purpose is important as well. You have to obviously assume that the reader is going to get the information that is needed from your referral letter, because you aren't just writing a random academic essay to a random professor, for example. This is supposed to actually duplicate what would be done in your day-to-day job and what you would expect to do if you were practicing your profession in the UK, for example.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that as well, because, the OET exam, it is trying to simulate reality.
Yeah.
It's trying to show, okay, this is what you will have to do if you become a doctor in the UK. You will have to write these kind of letters. You have to consider who's reading it. You have to consider laying out the most important information for both the patient and, of course, the doctor reading it or the medical professional reading it. And also you need to consider, time as well. Remember, all you medical professionals, you're busy people.
Of course.
So reading these kind of letters, you want to make sure that you're laying out the purpose of the letter straight away. You're laying out the information in a clear way that they can read it and really, read it as least little time as possible, really. And use it to the best of their advantage.
And communication is key as well. You have to be able to communicate and transfer your understanding. Also, the last thing we'll just say is essential in the overview as well is your ability to understand what is relevant in the case notes versus what is irrelevant as well. There's going to be too much information for you to actually use in the podcast.
In the
letter itself. This is the podcast. You guys are writing a letter in the letter itself. So you need to be able to get better at sifting through that information, finding what's relevant and what is irrelevant. So you manage to write a letter which fulfills that purpose, but also makes it nice and concise as well. So you're not going over 250 words.
And I also just want to point out that you're not expected, and it is not, do not do this, write lots of information based on your own experience or include information that wasn't included in the case notes, okay? So it's just based exactly on what is in the case notes, and it's simply a matter of transferring that information and, of course, expanding it into full sentences, expanding it into, using different vocabulary, things like this, but none of your own information or outside background information is required.
So shall we start now actually getting into the task itself and going through how we can actually properly write a good letter, but also most importantly, focusing on the case notes aspect of this podcast is what we're going to focus on today.
Yeah.
How to make the most of this case notes.
Well, shall we just go through the criteria? I like to always lay out what the criteria is of the writing, just to make sure the students know in approaching it, what the criteria you're actually marked on.
Sure,
yeah.
Let's go.
So let's just very quickly go over this. So of course, we have mentioned some of these words, these almost buzzwords, as we've already introduced the writing, but of course, purpose. Purpose is the first big criteria. This is really important. In the first paragraph, you need to lay out the purpose of your letter and of course expand on this as you're going through and develop it throughout the course of the letter. But basically, the purpose needs to be clear. Then we have content. So whether the required information is included in the letter and of course, whether it is accurate.
Which is important.
Yeah, so purpose, content.
Then we move on to conciseness and clarity. So whereas content actually takes into consideration the relevant information, conciseness and clarity takes into the extent how much irrelevant information has hopefully not been included. And also how concisely you have written it as well. Is the information clear, and have you actually made the use of your words and not written, for example, overly long sentence? And most importantly, does your word count come between 180 and 200 words ideally?
Exactly, yeah. Thinking about the word count there and not writing too many words in something that could have been a lot shorter.
Yes.
And then we have our genre and style, of course, and that's whether the register, like the kind of register you use, whether that be formal in tone, whether you're using abbreviations, if they are suitable for the person you're writing it to, considering if you're using abbreviations for someone in another profession and they wouldn't really understand the abbreviations for your profession.
Excellent.
So making sure you're avoiding that.
We then move on to organization and styles. So
organization and layout.
So organization and layout. So that's simply important. We need to actually talk about have you actually laid out the letter according to basically how a doctor's referral letter, for example, or a nurse's referral letter should be written. Does it have a letterhead? Does it have appropriate paragraphs? Do the paragraphs go through a logical layout? Do you sign the letter off as well? And also your structure overall. It's all very important.
Definitely, whether the reader is able to, read it easily. And then we have our language, of course, which is the accuracy of your grammar, your vocabulary, and your spelling. So grammar is very important, of course, in the OET letter. So basically, whether the reader is able to read your letter without any real difficulty. Yes.
Does it cause considerable strain or not?
Exactly. Does it cause strain to the reader? Okay, so let's get into it then. What is the first thing that the students should do when they get in and they see those case notes? Because the case notes can look very daunting, can't they? You can see all these abbreviations. You can see maybe sometimes symbols. You see that it's not written in full sentences. There's just words everywhere. What is the first thing we do?
The first thing that should be done is simply actually to avoid all of that information within the case notes and basically try to get a few things straight at the very beginning, aka the purpose of the letter. So how can we establish the purpose? Well, a few things we can look at the end of the case notes. Simply, who are we writing to? Is it someone of the same profession of us or not? Does a patient have a name? What is the name of the patient? And also, what are their main ailments? What are they mostly suffering from? And most importantly, what do you want the person you're referring to do. So the important thing to start off with is establishing purpose. When we have established the purpose, then we can understand what information may be relevant and may not be relevant within the case notes itself. So often go to the very end and see also what can be done.
Yeah, so going to the actual task.
The task itself.
So looking at the question and the task, that will actually give you that basic information that you need in order to proceed with the task. Like you said, who the recipient is.
I should also mention as well, we should also see it in the task itself. Are we writing a referral letter, an advice letter, a discharge letter? Because obviously, depending on the letter you have to write, everything else will change about it.
Yes, definitely. Making sure that you actually have it clear in your head what kind of letter it is. That's huge. And just noticing whether you have the name of the recipient as well, just to point that out at this stage. If you don't have the name of the recipient, then i.e. the medical profession you're sending it to, you're going to be writing Dear Sir or Madam. And then of course you can sign that off at the end with Yours faithfully. I just wanted to point that out because a lot of the time students don't write that, or they end up using the wrong sign off, Yours faithfully versus Yours sincerely.
Yours sincerely if you know the person you're writing to by name, Yours faithfully if you do not know the person.
Yes, and if you're writing Dear Sir, Madam. So that's it. First of all, you're looking at the question, you're looking at the task, asking yourself those questions like the recipient, what it is that you're dealing with in order to really approach this with a clear mind. Okay, so what's next then? We're going to start analysing, right?
We're going to start analysing the case notes. So we've obviously looked at the task, we've understood the purpose, who we're writing to, what we're writing about. Now we need to start looking at the case notes. So remember, at the very start of your task, you will have 5 minutes at the very beginning where you can't write, so you should be actually analysing those case notes within those 5 minutes. It is essential.
Yes, definitely. Looking through the case notes, skimming. Skimming is very important here as well in order to, really catch the information that's jumping out at you and get the overall main idea. Definitely. Remember that it is written in bullet points, okay? So the letter is going to be written in bullet points. You're not going to have those full sentences. It's going to be short and often ungrammatical phrases, okay? Often ungrammatical. So it is a skill, I think, as well, to be able to make sure that you practice looking at these case notes and the way in which they're written.
Yes.
Because there's often lists written in the case notes as well.
Lists and bullet points, a lot of abbreviations, a lot of symbols as well. You have to think about how you can expand those into full sentences. But it's a good idea to get understanding about what the symbols are, what the abbreviations mean, what are the bullet points alluding to as well, so you're actually getting the information to begin with, very importantly, in that analysis. But remember, we'll go into a bit more detail about this soon. You can't just simply copy and paste the case notes into a letter because you're not expanding upon them in a proper letter. But we'll get into more about that in terms of the linguistic skills we can use very soon.
Are you struggling with your OET exam preparation?
Are you unsure how to reach your target score of a grade A or B? Let Swoosh English help you get there.
go to www.swooshenglish.com or click the link in the description for your free OET Complete Guide to Writing.
Everything you need to know to pass your OET writing step by step. Go to www.swooshenglish.com or click on the link in the description below.
But as you are going through those notes and you're starting to select the information that is most important, what you have to do, as I mentioned before, is keep the recipient of your letter and the purpose of your letter in your mind the whole time, okay? As you go through the case notes, first of all, identifying what the health issue is. So making sure you identify what the health issue is and what the most recent health issue, or if they had an appointment that day or whatever it might be.
What is the main appointment? So for example, if the patient is in hospital, what are they in hospital for? That is the main ailment, because there may be information about medical history, which will be within those case notes, but they're not necessarily seeing the doctor or the nurse or the physiotherapist, for example, for that ailment. So if you actually get the wrong ailment diagnosed, then you're not going to score very highly for purpose. So make sure you actually understand what is the primary issue,
of course,
that the patient is in for.
That is so important, because I have read some letters where I'm just very confused as to, obviously I've looked at the case notes in advance, but if I was to read that letter for the first time, I would be very confused as to what the actual issue is they're writing about, because the student has perhaps mixed up all the dates. You know, maybe they visited the doctors or the hospital, you know, numerous times in the past with different issues, but that letter has actually not conveyed what the most recent one is very well, and that is obviously so important in order to make sure and put that medical professional you're writing to in the most clear position of what they have to do going forward. So as you're looking through those case notes, it is a good idea to start to cross out. Okay, start to cross out the information that you think is perhaps not relevant for the purpose of your letter, or also something that's really important to consider. And you will find this again in the task, in the question, that, you know, does this medical professional know this patient? Have they actually met them before? Or is this the first time that they're meeting them? Because that's something you're going to have to consider as you're going through it as well.
Because that can completely reword your introduction as well, your introductory paragraph, depending if you know the person or not. For example, if you don't know the patient, you might start off by saying, I am writing to refer to patient. If you do know the patient and this is maybe a follow-up appointment, you might start by saying, thank you for seeing such and such patient today instead. So it completely changes the tone of the letter as well, and makes the purpose also more abundantly clear too.
And it really is important that, you know, it changes the information that you select perhaps. So that's really important to consider. So start to cross out any information that you consider is irrelevant.
Irrelevant.
So also highlight or circle any information that you think, okay, that definitely needs to be included.
Yeah, so something that will actually stick out visibly as well. So a highlighter pen or a red pen, something that you can visually arrest you in terms of the information. Cross out information and combine as well. So information you might be crossing out, maybe stuff like marital status, jobs, family members, just stuff that the recipient doesn't really necessarily need to know in order to obviously diagnose or give help and treatment with the condition itself. But the essential information you'll be looking for will obviously be their health conditions, their ailments, their medication, how they've been feeling, any symptoms like that.
Yeah, what was done recently in order to assist them. Yeah,
any
definitely.
Dates like that there as well.
So circling and selecting the correct information to include is so important. Perhaps you could even go through the letter and start to number the information that you're going to include first. So as you're also going through the case notes, it's really important to, you know, think about the logical order that you're going to put the information in. Of course, with OET, there is no set structure that you should write your letter in. There's some guidelines you can follow in relation to whatever kind of letter it is, whether it's a referral letter, a discharge letter, but there's guidelines you can follow. And of course, you can, practice this and see what works best for you.
Yeah, as a general rule of thumb, what you should be doing now is obviously diagnosing the main issue at the very beginning. That's the purpose of your paragraph.
The most recent.
Yes, and then working through about what's happened in terms of the person's clinical history, from the most recent down to through chronological order, and then maybe having some information on social medical history at the very end, and then finally your call to action at the end, what you want to be done about that, as a rule of thumb. So when you're actually looking at your case notes, think about how you can organize that information with the numbers. For example, you might see the ailment. Okay, that's number 1. You see the name, which maybe number 1, sorry, and then the ailment number 2. Then you see a date, which is the most recent information. Okay, that's number 3, and then work through in order like that.
Yeah, definitely. You can use your numbers and write on those case notes in order to then bring that information, directly over to your letter. But of course, practice makes perfect when it comes to the selection of the correct information in case notes.
It does take time to get those habits into place as well, where you're actually going through in a chronological order and even using the case notes in the most chronological order too.
Yeah, and you will get more comfortable with this at the end of the day. The more you do it, the more comfortable it will come to you, okay? So just get practicing. Make sure you're practicing and receiving feedback on this in relation to, the structure of your letter, the information you're selecting. And at Swoosh English, we also offer lots of previously corrected letters, and that's a really good way to approach this as well. Having a look to see high standard letters and what information they selected for any given set of case notes. So that's really important and something you should do. Okay, yeah, so think about the most logical order and make sure that, you are satisfying that criteria of organization and layout. So, of course, we made that sound like a very long process. You have your 5 minutes to skim, and of course, you could use a wee bit of your time in the 40 minutes as well. But there is a lot for you to consider, a lot for you to do. Now we're going to move over to actually expanding those case notes into your letter.
So there's many things that we can do to expand upon the case notes, and as we obviously emphasize as well, it's just not good enough or sufficient for you to just copy and paste the case notes as they are into a letter. These letters will simply not score highly enough. So there are various things we want to look at in terms of what we can do to improve upon our case notes. And there's one thing I consistently see in the letters that I mark, and I can see they've just been taken from the case notes, are a lack of articles, for example. So we got a lack of an, or even pronouns, for example, as well, because obviously in the case note form, articles have been omitted. And of course, articles are quite convoluted. I recommend that everyone obviously practices articles as much as they can in their own time, but they are essential for making sure that we can write nice, cohesive sentences.
Definitely. Whenever you're putting them into your letter, the articles are very important. So shall we just read out some examples? Do we have an example?
That's right. Let's read some examples.
We have an example here where there's a sentence that is actually written, or not a sentence, it's like a bullet point that's written in the case notes, but then whenever we transfer it into the letter, how it should sound with the articles included. So perhaps the case notes say 6 week, and week is in shorthand with just WK, 6 week history progressively with an arrow. So don't forget, you are going to see symbols as well with an arrow pointing upwards. P and R and L knee joints. Okay.
So what might that symbol actually represent?
Increase.
Of course. So it's obviously you have to understand what these symbols need and then expand them into your sentences using appropriate wording.
Yes, exactly. So make sure that you've analysed the previous case notes and looked at symbols as well. Okay, so I'll just repeat that. 6 week history progressively, increase P and R and L knee joints, right and left, obviously. Okay. So a candidate who hasn't perhaps considered the use of articles might just transfer this into the case notes as patient has 6 week history of progressively increasing pain in right and left knee joints. Okay. Might not sound that bad, but let's just read what it would be. This is the correct form of this sentence. So the patient has a 6 week history of progressively increasing pain in the right and I emphasized the wrong word there, in the right and left knee joints. Okay, so as you can see, that sounds much better now we have actually included the articles the and a throughout the letter.
Yeah, so obviously look into where articles should be used. Of course, we got two definite articles here used before patient and right, because there's only one right knee being referenced, only one patient being referenced, and of course a 6 week history as well needs to be emphasized. So pay attention to your use of articles.
Definitely, and as Scott just mentioned, one of the rules there, but of course make sure you look into all of the rules.
We don't have time for an articles podcast. We do not.
Maybe someday we'll do an articles podcast. But yeah, make sure that you look into those rules. And it's really important, I always stress this when it comes to any skill, whether it be speaking or writing. Make sure your foundational skills are up to scratch, you know? Make sure you've practiced lots of exercises separate to OET, just on articles or just on tenses or whatever it might be.
So ideally, of course, just to go off topic slightly 1 second, that if you are obviously getting some form of feedback in your OET preparation from a native speaker or a teacher, etc., they're going to give you some information about what your weaknesses might be. It's up to you to actually go away and do your homework on those weaknesses. And of course, articles is something I often see as well.
Definitely.
It is important that you, as Una says, build up your foundational skills for those, because you need for those to increase.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so the next thing is you are going to see a lot of lists in the case note. And sometimes, you know, I have read letters from students previously where these lists are almost just included in the letter, and it just doesn't sound right. You end up sometimes with very long sentences as well, you know, and they just don't flow nicely. You don't have enough connectors in there, enough punctuation, and it's just not
There
good.
might be too much punctuation. There could be like 5 or 6 commas in one sentence. So there's obviously there's been a lack here of linking words and cohesive devices to link these ideas together. So let's go through an example. An example we might see in the case notes might be depressive symptoms, open bracket, reclusive, comma, antisocial, comma, irritable, comma, agitation, comma, close brackets. And often we might see that just copy and pasted in a sentence. So obviously you shouldn't be using brackets with the case notes. You should be expanding upon this information as much as possible. So here's an idea about how the information could be expanded using some of these cohesive devices and these linking words. The patient has demonstrated depressive symptoms, including a tendency towards reclusive and antisocial behavior. She has also shown signs of irritability and agitation. So we've expanded upon these case notes with 2 sentences using linking words such as including and also, etc., etc.
Excellent. Yeah, that's so important. That's the 2 sentences there that you had sounded so much better, didn't it? It sounded so much better. So make sure that you are looking at lists and avoiding just directly bringing them into your letter. Looking at how you can form a full grammatically structured, correctly grammatically structured sentence over into your letter.
And these need to be expanded upon as well.
And it doesn't have to be like a really complicated, complex sentence.
Yeah,
it just needs to be using accurate grammar.
It does. So obviously, don't try and make it as wordy as possible, but expand upon it. You're thinking, how the heck do I do all of this practice?
Yes, exactly.
There's a lot to take on.
Okay, and make sure you consider word order as well. Word order is really important. Again, it's a sort of thing where students will just copy over the word order again from the case notes, but it's in bullet point form. And whenever we actually speak them, as a native speaker might do, they're going to use the word order quite differently.
Yes.
They're going to make sure the sentence is structured in a way where the most important information is easily accessible to the reader. So another example might be medications. So this is the case notes example, okay? Medications OA glucosamine, 1,500 mg daily, okay? And then in the formal letter, we would change it over to, in reference to medication, the patient takes 1,500 milligrams of glucosamine per day for osteoarthritis.
Yeah. So the measurement will come first, then we have the preposition of, then we have the name of the medication. For example, 2 tablets of paracetamol. For example, just to use a daily example. For that.
So this really just helps the reader, locate the information in a cohesive, logical way. So making sure that you are practicing forming these kind of sentences from the case notes and expanding those case notes in the correct way is so important, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah, it's important for all elements of the criteria, really, for your cohesiveness, for your accurate vocabulary, accurate grammar, the organization and layout. Super important.
There's one final thing we should also include as well, which we may have omitted, and that is obviously a very tricky one: verb tenses.
Oh, verb tenses.
So of course you're going to be talking about it. Obviously, the case notes are going to include lots of information for different periods of time through a patient's medical history. So you need to think, how can I actually link all this together in an appropriate verb tense? You're obviously going to have your simple tenses and your complex tenses all mixed in together. So let's have a look at an example here of our notes. So you might say something like this: case notes, downward arrow, ADL - stopped accessing local shops and friends within walking distance. You think, what does that mean? And also, when did all of this happen? Here's an example which you might write it as: the patient has reduced her activities of daily living, obviously referring to what's happened now. Specifically, she has stopped accessing local shops and visiting friends who live by. So we've used, obviously, the verb has, then we have the past
So
past
you're
simple
using
verb too.
present perfect.
We're using present perfect here overall.
Present perfect because it began in the past, but it's still happening now. It's still important now. It's still relevant now.
Highly relevant also. So obviously we can see in the case notes too, it said stop accessing local shops and friends. But you can't really use the verb access with friends. You don't access your friends. So you need to expand upon that. And that's why the example uses the verb has stopped accessing the local shops. Obviously you access a shop. But visiting friends who live nearby. So you have to obviously adapt that sentence, maybe adding verbs or even modifying your verbs depending on what's needed. So it's up to you to decide upon that on the day.
Definitely, that's so important. So guys, there's some examples for you in the ways which you can avoid, overly relying on those case notes through the use of lists, also leaving out your articles, using incorrect tenses and word order, making sure that you focus on those things when you bring it over into letter format, and making sure you remember as you write your letter who you're writing it to and all the different criteria that you have to satisfy as you're going through your letter in order to get, the highest grade that you want, of course, to achieve in your OET exam.
And of course, what comes with that is just practice, getting your feedback, and also maybe just applying one thing every day. For example, you might need to work on how cohesive your letter is. So write a letter and think about how you can use more linking words, okay? Second letter you might write, it might be, obviously, I'm forgetting my articles. I'm going to review my articles and try and including more articles within the letter, etc., etc. Working on one thing for each letter, or maybe two things, for example, and trying to see that overall improvement happen as you go through.
Definitely. And like you said, it's so important to get feedback, but then once you do get feedback, to also reflect on the feedback that you have received, and making sure that you don't just go, oh yes, I made those mistakes, but then go straight into writing another letter and don't really pay attention to the mistakes that you have made.